you might be new to aquariums and you might be overwhelmed with all of the information that's out there when it comes to taking care of your fish tanks, you know, decorating your aquariums, taking care of your wet pets. Well, today I'm going to give you 5 tips for beginners that will make your life a lot easier. Hey fish friends, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Zenzo with Tazawa Tanks. So yes, I'm gonna give you some tips that are gonna make your life a lot easier. Now, if you've been keeping fish tanks for a long time, you might still learn a trick or two from this, but if you're new to fish tanks, then definitely I would suggest taking some of these into practice, as it could make your life a lot easier and more enjoyable. Now, the first thing I wanna talk about, which is kind of more of an idea, is to simplify things. And what I mean by simplify is it's very easy for new fish keepers to get caught up in, you need to have this, you need to have this, you need to do that. So I see a lot of people that say, I got this aquarium and now I gotta get, you know, a refugium, and I need a reactor, and I need to get this equipment, and I need that equipment. And next thing you know, you've spent like $500 on equipment that you probably don't need. You probably only need, you know, your aquarium, good water to start with, you know, tap water, some dechlorinator, some medications on hand, and, you know, simple filter, a heater, just the basics, right? So oftentimes I think people get caught up in, I need to have this, I need to have that. And I did the same thing many years ago, where I was like, oh, I'd go to the fish store. Says this was, you know, back then there was the internet, but we weren't using the internet. There were no smartphones or anything like that. I think I didn't even have a cell phone at this time. So this was, you know, many years ago. I'd get the magazines, and I'd go to the fish store and I'd see some new equipment. I'm like, oh, I need that, or I need this. I ended up with like a box of stuff that I just never used, or I used it for a while and I didn't need it. And I think a lot of people get caught up in that. So before you get caught up in, I need this light and this heater and this kind of thing, just simplify things and just try to keep it as natural and as easy as possible, because it'll save you money. It will save you time, and will probably make your, you know, fish keeping experience more enjoyable. Now, if you like to buy things and spend money on gadgets and try all the latest and greatest, there's no harm in that. But my advice for beginners is to keep it simple, simplify things, try to go as natural as possible, use some live plants, and you'll probably avoid a lot of the pitfalls that people fall into when they start getting crazy with fish equipment. One more thing that I would add to keeping things simple is don't chase changes, or don't make big changes. So if you want to try something new in your aquarium, then do one thing and see how that works, and just do it a little bit. Don't go drastic, right? So if you make a bunch of changes and then your tank crashes or all the water parameters go off, you don't know which change that you made resulted in that situation. So if you make a small change, observe for a week or two, maybe tweak it and kind of go that way, then you'll avoid those catastrophes by avoiding not knowing what happened when you made that change in your fish tank. Now, the next tip for any beginner, or for anyone that keeps aquariums, to make things easier is to make it easy to move water. Now, you might think, you know, as you set up an aquarium, that you can just do water changes by, you know, siphoning into a bucket. But for anyone that's been keeping fish tanks for a long time, you know that gets very tiresome. It leads to a lot of spills. It might lead you to neglect your fish tank and not do maintenance as often, because you dislike having to siphon water into a 5-gallon bucket and then stop the siphon and go pour out that bucket after you carry a 40-pound bucket of water and dump it somewhere. Then you got to come back and do the whole thing again, start to siphon again. So for a lot of people, they dislike doing that, and for obvious reasons. So making it easy to move water is very important. One thing that I really like to use is I use a submersible pump. And I've talked about this many times before in videos. And basically all it is it's a big pump, and you can use fountain pumps, you know, pond pumps, specific aquarium pumps. Attach it to some kind of hose and run it into a drain, plug it in, obviously put it into your aquarium, plug it in, and you can pump water directly from your aquarium into the drain. Now that doesn't address things like gravel vacuuming, which I've talked about in recent videos, and you can watch it up here. It doesn't address gravel vacuuming, things like that, but you can, like, you know, disturb the substrate with like a stick or something, and then have that pump head nearby and just pump that disturbed water out. Or you're just moving water out of your aquarium and you may not need to do a gravel vac at that time. But basically, making it very easy to move water in and out of your aquariums is going to be critical, because one, it'll ensure that you're doing it more often because it's going to be easy. It's going to save your back. It's going to save, you know, so many things, spills on the carpet, your hardwood floors. So imagine having a 75-gallon aquarium or a 125, or even like a 30 or 40-gallon aquarium. If you're doing, let's say, a 50% water change in a 40-gallon aquarium, that's 20 gallons. If you're using a 5-gallon bucket, that's 4 trips. If it's all the way to the top, if it's not all the way top, it's probably more like 5 trips, because you're not filling it to the very top of that bucket. And so you're basically siphoning, pouring out the bucket, doing it again and again and again and again, 5 times, right? If you just had a submersible pump, you could drop that right in the aquarium, pump the water out, and then when it's time to put water back into the aquarium, you could use things like a Python or similar device. You could also use that same pump and either plug up the sink with a stopper and then fill the sink with temperature, acclimated water, and pump that back into the aquarium. You could also put like a bucket underneath that faucet and then pump the water back into the aquarium, or just use something like this that will attach to your faucet. You might need to use an adapter, but I've got one set up in my living room that attaches to this. I've done it to bathroom sinks before. And something like this, you can also do the gravel vacuuming part. So if you are unlike me and you do like to do gravel vacuuming often, you can use one of these, and it will help you in moving that large amount of water, but also in gravel vacuuming. The next tip that I have is very easy, and that is don't guess, test. So it's something very easy to remember. Basically, what you want to do is you don't want to be guessing about what is going on in your aquarium. Is my aquarium cycled? Is there an ammonia spike? Do I have high nitrates? Is it time for a water change? Is it the right pH level? All these things, especially for a beginner, can be overwhelming. So you want to be able to test the water with some type of test kit to let you know what's going on with you without you having to guess and chase your tail. Basically, you just want something to tell you what's going on so that you could ignore it or, address it. So if you test it and everything looks good and the nitrates are perfect and you don't need to do a water change, and you can just ignore that and continue on with checking it again in a few days. Or you notice something's off, you're not quite sure what it is, so you'll want to check it and see what the issue is so you know how to fix it. So there are different test kits. You might have something like the Master Test Kit, which is quite common. You might go a little bit crazy and get like some mega test kit like this one, which is like a lot of money, but it does everything. Or you can do what's my favorite, and that's to use a test strip. So I like using test strips. These ones happen to be from Aquarium Co-op, who I work for, but these are great because they're very easy. So like in this one, there's 200 in here. All I need to do is open the top, dip it in there for a few seconds, follow the instructions, set it aside, go back a minute later, and I can see what's going on with my aquarium. And for me, I can do that 30 times because I've got a lot of aquariums. Or if you have 2 or 3 aquariums, or if you want to do it frequently, just having something like this is very easy to test. Yes, you can use, like the Master Test Kits and things like that, but they do take a little bit more time. But whatever it is that you want to use, just have something that tells you what's going on with your water so you don't have to guess. Tip number 4 is pretty easy. Have live plants. Having live plants in your aquarium is so beneficial. It's going to help with creating hiding places for your shy fish or for baby fish if you have fish that happen to spawn and create young. It's great aesthetically as it makes the tank look good. It also helps with the water quality. So live plants are going to absorb a lot of those things that your test kit is telling that you have in your tank by removing the nitrates, by removing excess phosphates, etc., because the plants will use those as fertilizer. So the plants will grow, they'll flourish, and your water quality will improve. So lots of benefits of having live plants. And so I recommend having live plants pretty much in every aquarium. I did make a video recently on how to have live plants with more difficult fish, so you can watch that later. I'll put a link up here or down below in the description. So that would be a good one to watch if you're not sure how to have live plants with your fish that are more destructive. But having live plants, definitely something I would recommend for any fish keeper, whether you're a beginner or experienced, but definitely for beginners, it will make your life easier. Tip number 5 is to have your aquarium lights set up on a timer. Now there are different timers that you can use. You can use like the old dial type timers, and I've used those before. You can use some of the more modern ones like Wi-Fi plugs, which I happen to use for all of my equipment down here, all my lights. And basically all that is it's a smart plug, or you can use an old-fashioned dial timer, but you want to set it to where your aquarium lights are not on all the time. Let's say that you turn on your lights in the morning before you go to school or work because you want the lights on for some reason, and you come home and you enjoy your fish, and then you forget to turn your lights off, and then you come there the next morning, the lights are still on, and like there's algae growing, right? And your fish aren't rested because they didn't really get a chance to sleep, and so you could have some issues with your fish health. If you have a timer, then you're whether you forget or whatever's going on, maybe you're away for a couple days and someone was supposed to turn the lights on or off or whatever, you don't have to worry about that. It's all on timer. They turn on every day at the same time. They turn off every day at the same time. Obviously, if you're doing some type of modern smart plug, you can program them to be different on different days. So for me, as an example, I have them come on later in the day, Monday through Friday. And on the weekends, when I'm spending more time in here during the daytime, I'll have them come on a little bit earlier, and I stagger them. And this way you can ensure that your lights are on at the proper amount of time. Not too long, not too little, depending on the aquarium plans, algae, etc. But having timers, definitely worth the few bucks that it costs to have a timer, and very, very important for beginners because it will make your life a lot easier and take away that guesswork when it comes to lighting. Now I do want to have one little bonus here, and the bonus is to be prepared for the unexpected, for emergencies, anything, whether it's an emergency to your fish tank, or to you. You want to be prepared. You're a beginner, you're new to fish keeping, you don't want to be overwhelmed if something happens, or you don't want someone else to be overwhelmed if something happens to you. One thing that I do is I have basically like an emergency procedures form that's stapled or nailed to the outside of my fish room here. So if something happens to me, let's say I'm stuck out of town and travel got delayed and I couldn't come home, or maybe I got injured or sick or something and I can't take care of my fish for a few weeks, my wife or kids or whatever, they can open that envelope and say, oh, I can call this person if I need to do a water change. Oh, I can see that the fish don't need to eat for X amount of days. And it has all the instructions for something as simple as I'm not able to take care of them for a few days to something tragically happening and I'm not able to care for them anymore. So having a plan is important, but also having a plan for your fish. So let's say that you live in a very cold environment and maybe you keep your fish in a basement or the garage or something like that, and it's not, it's not in your home that's 70 degrees or whatever. You want to make sure that if your heater fails, that your fish don't freeze, right? So if it's 40 degrees outside and your garage is 45 degrees and you keep your fish tank in your garage, you should probably have a backup heater to ensure that if something goes wrong, that you don't have to wait 2 days for that new heater to arrive, or maybe the roads are closed because there's snow and you can't get to the store, or maybe the store's closed for snow or whatever. So you don't want to lose your fish tank just because your heater craps out or something like that. So making sure that you have backups on certain critical things like an air pump, like a heater, stuff like that's very important. Also encounter for power outages. So these little ecosystems are reliant upon power in most cases. Now you might have some natural aquarium that has like sunlight and you live in a warmer climate, so you don't have to worry about heaters, and you have a kind of an understocked tank with lots of plants, so maybe you don't have a lot of equipment in your aquariums. But most of us have some type of filtration that requires power. Heaters, obviously, if you have them in a place that's not super warm. So things like that, you're gonna need to have some type of power supply, whether that's a generator, battery powered air pumps, backup battery banks, things like that available. So always think about what could happen and just be prepared. That way, if something happens and you don't have to worry and freak out. Also medication. So I see all the time where people will ask, hey, I got this fish, it's sick, it looks like ick, what should I do? And the ick is very prominent in the tank, it's all over the fish, and maybe they don't have access to go to the fish store right away to buy ick medication, or maybe if they're going to order it online, it might take 3 days, and that 3 days might mean the difference between them being able to save the fish and those fish dying from that parasite. So having simple medications on hand, if they're readily available in your country, I do recommend having some on hand. So yeah, so those are my tips on how to make your fish keeping experience a little bit easier, especially if you're a beginner. If you do want to learn some more about fish keeping, especially for your beginner fish keepers, then watch the video right here.